Thanks, Vincent, for a lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Vishal from Riscomp, and I am excited to present on the topic. I'm a fellow in information privacy, and for almost 15 years, I have been providing advisory and consulting services in security and privacy and data protection. But that's something on the professional side, and on the personal side, I'm a millennial. I have a mole on the right side of my nose. I wear prescription glasses and fond of water sports and cross-country running. Now, with this introduction, I'm confident of receiving a quotation on my health insurance. I will not be surprised if tomorrow my web browser is filled with some exciting quotations from health insurance service providers. Yes, you guessed it right. Personal data is a revenue generating asset in today's digital world. For companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, an individual is not just a record, but a revenue generating asset. For example, I came to know an important metric within Amazon that for them, a digital record of a living human being in United States is roughly around 800 US dollars. And this again varies with the demographic of the person, the shopping habit of the person. So in today's world, I would say that undeniability, data is the new gold. So friends, today I would be talking about the most pressing challenges organizations face, especially ERP teams and data controllers, data owners face when it comes to dealing with protecting personal data. We are often tasked by business or legal teams to protect personal data. However, I would see this as smoke, mirrors, and abstract statement, and there is no clarity as to how to proceed. We are eventually lost in thoughts as to where to start. So this is going to be a techno strategy presentation where I would be covering trends and state of privacy compliance, especially with respect to EU-GDPR, give clarity and objectivity into privacy risks, its differences and overlaps with security. I would be showing you data and process-oriented strategies, an example of privacy by design embedded in the system lifecycle. Then finally, we are going to talk about privacy control frameworks, cyber resilience, and products and solutions by SAP that fit the purpose. Now, I'm confident that you would be able to build your investment thesis that with which you can allocate budgets maybe next year or the year after. So let's get
Vishal,
started.
Vishal, sorry, can you just move your micro a little bit down to have a better sound?
Hello,
Yes,
is that better?
yes, it's better. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah. So let's have a look at what's the status quo for all the fines and violations, taking drawing some examples from EU GDPR. Um, so the if you have a look at the slide, I have two important graphs here. Let's have a look at the first graph. So starting May 2018 till January 2021, we see, sorry, this is June 2021, we see that there has been an exponential rise in terms of the overall sum of fines. If we have a look at the second graph, it shows us that we have a linear rise in the overall number of fines. Countries that have handed over maximum number of fines happen to be Luxembourg, Ireland, Italy, France, Germany. The top violations that we have seen so far, uh, dating back to 2018, has been Article 32, which is the insufficient technical and organizational measures, and the Article 5, which is nothing but legal basis for data processing. So what we see here is that the total dollar value of all the fines is increasing since 2018, and the number of fines are increasing in a linear fashion. Total number of fines are also increasing. What I observe is that this is just a tip of the iceberg. Two of the most important fines till date have been that caught my eye are the ones that are handed over to Amazon and H&M. So, um, so Amazon was fined violating not complying to Article 5, wherein they didn't have the legal basis for data processing, and H&M did extensive profiling on their own applications. So this is this gives us a fair idea as to what we are seeing since 2018. Again, let's have some detailed analysis. The top 3 articles that we see that are being violated are from 2018 to 2021. In 2018, it was Article 5. In 2021, it is still Article 5. In 2018, we saw that for the second ranked article that is violated was not sufficient information provided to the data subjects. And then it is Article 6 in 2021, which is lawfulness of processing. Again, security, which is Article 32, is something that has gained traction as far as 2021 is concerned. So, but we also have some interesting facts here. As of now, only 47% of all companies across the world self-report as fully compliant with EU-GDPR, and out of this 47%, only 11% have dedicated technology platforms for managing privacy compliance. Privacy compliance is very, very, very important. The reason being that no company would like to take the risk of not being compliant and pay fines which could anywhere be between 2% to 4% of the total worldwide revenue of the company. There are many factors that determine fines. For example, what is the article violated? What is the severity of the impact? Whether post uh, post violation, was there any cooperation that was missing with the DPAs? And what are the efforts and the maturity shown by the company towards privacy compliance? So what we can see here is that year 2021 has been an explosion year of fines, and I think we have reached almost an inflection point where organizations are left with no choice but to invest in privacy compliance. With this, I go into the crux of the presentation. All right. So let's have a look at what are the differences and overlaps between security and privacy. Security, as we know, that this is comprising of 3 risks, and that is nothing but confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Privacy risks, on the other hand, have 3 additional risks, and I mean 3 additional risks addition to the risks which are inherent from security, and these are identifiability, linkability, inference. These are also privacy risks, or you can also call them as privacy dimensions. What is identifiability? I would say that this corresponds to the possibility to isolate some or all records which identify an individual in a data set. Linkability is the ability to link at least 2 records concerning the same data subject or a group of data subjects, either in the same database or in 2 different databases. Linking vulnerability. So every privacy risk that we see, identifiability, linkability, and inference, can be exploited by attackers. So what we also need to know that all security risks are privacy risks, and identifiability, linkability, and inference of a data subject from a data set without a legitimate purpose is a privacy risk. I would leave as an exercise, I would ask my audience to go and research a bit about what was Netflix versus IMDb case, how linkability and identifiability attacks could be carried out, even though certain data was masked. All right. Let's have a look. Let's go to the next slide. Here I would be talking about what is privacy friendliness. Privacy friendliness and what is the relationship between data privacy and data utility. I have a theory that data privacy is inversely proportional to data utility. The reason being, the more private you want to have your data, you have to compromise on the utility of the data, and vice versa. So, but how do you strike a balance between these 2 goals? You may have your legal teams, your legal internal data protection officer telling you that protect as much personal data as possible, whereas when you go to the business teams, they will say, okay, if the data is too private, we are not able to do the analysis. So how do you strike a balance? Now, to strike a balance, I would depict this in the graph that you see on the right hand side. In this graph, on the x-axis, I have the degree of network centricity going from high to low, and on the y-axis, I have how identifiable is PII. So if you want to increase the privacy friendliness, I would suggest that you have a low network centricity. That means you store your your private data in disparate databases, in distributed databases, across networks, across network segments, um, and at the same time you decrease the degree of identifiability. That means you can apply any of the privacy enhancing techniques or I mean very simple techniques which we are going to see later in the slides, and strike a balance between them. So this gives us uh, a nice depiction of how you can be privacy friendly and balance data privacy and data utility. For better privacy, there are some characteristics of the database, um, and these characteristics could be measured on two dimensions of privacy, which is identifiability and linkability. For better privacy, this is the database has to be less linkable and less identifiable. So this is how you achieve a sweet spot for data reuse and repurpose. Now, having talked about um, what privacy enhancing techniques are possible, let's have a deep dive on what are data oriented strategies. So whenever we get an answer, we get a requirement, okay, we have to protect the personal data or make it available for repurposing. There are two major categories or two major strategies that you have to adopt. The first strategy is data oriented strategy, and the second strategy is process oriented strategy. Data oriented strategies are falling under four high levels, which are obfuscation, data minimization, security, privacy engineering. Obfuscation could be very simple, like masking, tokenization, noise, hashing. Minimization is about getting rid of data in first place as much as possible. It could be granulation, segregation, deletion, aggregation, and any de-identification, which is nothing but combination of obfuscation or any other specific data minimization technique. Security is something that we're already aware of: encryption, access control, DLPs or data loss prevention, auditing, testing. Privacy engineering, or here we talk about, privacy enhancing techniques. So privacy enhancing techniques are actually some sophisticated algorithmic treatment to the data, which is done, which would strike a balance between the utility and the privacy quotient of the data. So as you know that privacy enhancing techniques work on three identifiers in a record. This could be, I would say, the direct identifier. A direct identifier within a record is something that identifies an individual. For example, a first name, last name, yeah, so on and so forth. The quasi identifier, which is an indirect identifier, is something that is a metadata about a data subject. And here this could be something like the attributes. Let's say if I introduce myself as somebody wearing glasses or having a mole on my right side of my nose, something like that. Yeah. Then there are sensitive attributes, which could be sensitive data about an individual, like health conditions. Yeah. So privacy enhancing techniques actually are applied on one of these attributes. So yeah, and depending upon this, you could as a result, you could be arriving at a pseudonymous data, anonymous data, or completely de-identified data. There are clear differences between what is pseudonymized data, anonymized data. Pseudonymized data is something which in which the direct identifiers are eliminated or transformed with one of the pets or a combination of pets, but the indirect identifiers are intact. So the possibility to identify the data from pseudonymized data is still possible. So identifiable attacks are possible on pseudonymized data. Anonymized data is something in which both direct as well as indirect identifiers are manipulated with mathematical algorithms, which will guarantee that the data subject cannot be identified. So whenever there is a data breach, if there was a compromise on the anonymous data, EU-GDPR does not require notification to authorities and to data subjects. So anonymized data is exempted from notification to authorities. Whereas if there is a compromise of pseudonymized data, one has to go and inform the data subject as well as the data to the data protection authority. So with this, we know, there could be several questions like, okay, Vishal, tell us what is the difference between masking and pseudonymization. So masking is a very general term. So you either mask a direct identifier or an indirect identifier. However, with masking, it's a general term. So there's no legal term, or in the legal world, this word is not used. Pseudonymized data is something that you specifically apply to the indirect identifier. And with some reasonable computing effort, it is possible to reconstruct or re-identify the data. So removing identifiers or masking the identifiers it will not guarantee privacy, because it is still susceptible to identifiability or linkability attacks. And again, the best example would be the Netflix versus IMDb. And this is where I clear the air. What is the difference between masking, pseudonymization? Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next slide then. So if you are a data controller or a data owner, or maybe if you are in a privacy team, security team, and you have been tasked, please choose the pet. So how to arrive at what privacy enhancing technique to choose here? So I would strongly recommend to follow a decision flow as seen in this slide. I have depicted some 3 use cases here. Let's say you have an example where you want to share personal data with an outsourcing service provider in a third country, which does not have an adequate level of protection by authorities, assessed by the authorities. Let's say this country happens to be Vietnam or some Southeast Asian country. What would you do? Which privacy enhancing technique would you use? So let's go through this decision flow here. Share data with third party, need PII to be part of dataset, yes or no? If you do not want the PII to be part of dataset, please use any de-identification technique. However, if you want the PII to be part of dataset, or make it available for the purpose of the data owner or for the third party. So if the original purpose is still intact, for example, in outsourcing, an outsourced service provider is still supposed to give you extended services for your business. So the original purpose still remains the same. So in such cases, the best recommended privacy enhancing technique is going to be homomorphic encryption. And if the purpose is meant for the third party, that means you are selling the data. In such cases, there are no such pets available, and you have to rely on data transfer agreements or any of the process-oriented strategy that we will see in upcoming slides. If you want to publish insights, please use differential privacy. So differential privacy is something which is very commonly used now. Even US Census Bureau 2020 used differential privacy to do some large-scale analysis on their population without compromising on the privacy of individuals. So yes, so this is about this adoption strategy of data-oriented strategies. Let's have a look at next slide. So again, this slide is nothing but giving us an overview of what are the risks associated with choosing each of those pets. I would suggest always go for k-anonymity and differential privacy. Just for your information, SAP HANA has been, there are inbuilt functions provided by SAP HANA that would allow you to prepare the data. All right, now let's have a look at process-oriented strategy. Process-oriented strategy is something that you do on top of data-oriented strategies. You have to have some sophisticated investments here. So they fall under 4 different categories, and all are mandatory. So you have inform, control, enforce, demonstrate. So under inform strategy, if the object, there are some clear objectives and design controls. So you have to have an objective of notifying the data subjects, and how do you achieve it? By designing controls around it. For example, data breach notification, privacy notices, privacy policies. If you want to give control to data subjects, what is the objective of that? It is to empower data subject. How do you do that? By designing a control around it. This is nothing but consent management. How do you enforce? So under enforce strategy, you have respect for privacy regulation. So with this, you have to design controls surrounding access controls, security, encryption. Yeah. Then something called as privacy impact analysis or data protection impact assessment. And then the 4th strategy is about demonstrations. Demonstrate. As you all know that one of the, I think Article 42 is clearly requiring organization to be compliant, and they expect organization to demonstrate compliance with regards to privacy regulations, especially, I mean, of course, EU GDPR. How do you achieve it? You achieve it by designing some controls, say, for example, record, audit, report, maintenance of privacy dashboards. The conclusion that I would draw here is that there are some SAP solutions like SAP Process Control or SPG that will allow you to prepare governance for those controls. There are also SAP allied products for control operations. And I would say that both data and process-oriented strategies have to coexist. They cannot exist in isolation. Let's have a look at this particular block diagram in our next slide. So this, what you see in this diagram is marriage of both data and process-oriented strategy. Assume that you have maintained records of processing and you have raw data, or you are about to prepare data for repurposing. So what you do is you apply both data-oriented strategies as well as process-oriented strategies in parallel. You minimize. Minimize means, the strategy of minimize means that you have to answer whether processing of personal data is proportional with respect to the purpose, and whether no other less invasive means exist to achieve the same purpose. Now, the decision to collect personal data can be made at the design time or at runtime and could take various forms. For example, one could decide that I do not have to collect any information about a particular data subject at all. So you could minimize your at the time of collection. And how do you achieve it? You could achieve it by any of the pseudonymization or any of the PETS techniques that we have seen. We could also have I mean, it could also be a simple select query, an SQL query like select before you collect. That's what we call it. Then there is something called as separation. Separation is nothing but we mandate that personal data should be processed in a distributed fashion, is in as many different compartments as possible. So we talked about network centricity. So this is very relatable. This strategy is very relatable to what we have discussed already. Then we talk about aggregation. Aggregation, nothing but we say that personal data should be processed at the highest level of aggregation, and with least possible detail, which is still useful. So how to achieve it? We could use, for example, k-anonymity here. Now, hide is something that if you want to apply a simple masking technique or hide certain sensitive identifiers. Yeah, so this is a clear depiction. So now, both, for example, if you see in this block diagram, we have an interaction with data subjects. We are informing to the data subject. The data subject is giving control to us, to its data, which is lying here. Data controller has its obligations to enforce, demonstrate to supervisory authority, drive the data-oriented strategy, and also process-oriented strategy. Then, after having applied process and data-oriented strategy, it has to be amended with standard contractual clauses or data transfer agreements or binding corporate rules before the data is presented to data importer or processor. All right. Let's move to the next slide now. And here we talk about privacy control frameworks. So there are many industry best practices or best frameworks that are available. They are NIST, ISO, AICPA. Then you also have the cyber quantification and fair practices. So they are more cyber oriented. So each of these control frameworks are specialized in their own domains. And some of the domains are common across all these frameworks, and some of the domains are quite exclusive. So this is very helpful because EDBP or European Commission encourage such schemes or adoption of such frameworks to demonstrate compliance with regulations. So, I mean, based on our experience, I would say that no individual framework is best, because the contextual integrity of one organization differs. Let's say if you're a retail business, you are different in operating and as to a healthcare business, and even the contextual integrity of the data processing differs. So yes, so what you have to do is you have to arrive at the at the combination of the several control domains that we have here. All right, let's move to the next slide then. Here So this is something very theoretical, and there are clear whenever you design a system, you have to make sure that it is private by design, or let's call it privacy by design. This has some 7 foundational principles, like the the system has to be proactive, not reactive. Uh, Privacy has to be provided as a default settings. Privacy has to be embedded in design. Positive sum, not zero sum. End-to-end security has to be provided while you process the data. There has to be visibility and transparency to the data subjects and the processing. And every step that you do with the processing, it has to be user-centric. What we would recommend here is um, that always follow a risk-based approach, balance risk opportunities, balance utility and privacy, as well as balance security and privacy. Too much security, too much utility requirements cannot guarantee privacy. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide now. This is just a continuation of privacy by design. How and where to start. So since we don't want any smoke mirrors and abstract interactions between our teams within the organization, how do we have, how do we I mean, what could be a foundation as a starter? How could ERP teams, security and privacy teams prepare themselves? So the first thing that we expect is that the conventional IT SAP security team needs to step up their game. They need to augment their skills. They need to establish working relationship between privacy legal, data governance, legal IT, data management, and ethics teams. It's very important. They must always read these records of processing, read the risk assessment or the risk rating as a result of data protection impact assessment or DPIA. You must always target all personal data and apply all the low-hanging toms like encryption, access controls. Apply toms post pets. Yeah. Um, Apply pets only if you're asked by privacy legal. So if you think that the risk is low, if they say that the risk is low, then you may adopt a pet which is very minimalistic in terms of budget or cost to implement. You must always make sure that your data lifecycle is managed and is fully compliant during all the stages. You also need to make sure that the UI UX design is user centric, and the code development standards have to be amended. I could vouch for the SAP code. As you all know, that SAP code for ship processes are private by design. However, for custom developments, you have to make sure that you need to amend your existing development standards, because if you miss them, then you cannot embed privacy by design while you develop the code. Then cookie and consent management. You need to integrate a third-party solution for consent lifecycle management. We would also recommend that you carry out regular penetration testing of all systems which are processing personal data, both gray box, white box. That means do the thorough code testing. Let's have a look at privacy by design, how you could embed in privacy by design in V model of system development. So what you see in the left hand side is the development arm, and what you see in the right hand side is the verification arm of system development lifecycle. Now within each block you could embed privacy requirements. So for example, in concept formulation of the system, requirements engineering of system, you could also embed privacy requirement definition while you develop the system architecture. And when you develop the system design, you can embed the design, the privacy design and implementation. That means adoption of pets and security techniques. And as and when you move to the user verification, as and when you move to upwards towards the right arm, each block, within each block, you could verify what you specified earlier in the development arm. So this, somebody who is coming from a CSV background would know what this V model is and how privacy by design can be embedded here. Yeah, let's move to the next slide. In the next slide, we talk about cyber resilience. So as we know that digital transformation is opening new opportunities every day. However, it's also creating an array of new cyber threats. We know that digital innovations expand the target area for cyber attacks, as the hackers and the threat actors find new ways to penetrate information networks and steal and disrupt. For example, you could have nation states hackivists, organized crimes, trusted insiders as well. So you have a diversity of whole threat actors, motivations, tactics. So what we know is that the attack surface is growing significantly, and I mean the risks are innumerable. For example, digital risks. You have Internet of Things. Uh, the digital boundaries are reducing because the focus is more on the velocity of operations and not security. Cloud risks, SAP cloud and SAP systems linked to cloud solutions. There are many third-party solutions as well. Change management, agile development with fast change implementations. If you're using APIs, if your company is using a stateless API management systems, then they are also offering additional attack services. We all know that SAP vulnerabilities are also traded in dark web. So this is like business case for many rogue states. So what we know now is that in 2021 we have observed that traditional resilient models are obsolete. So starting 1960s, data backup used to be the golden standard of how an organization would like to be resilient. In 1970s, this came to be disaster recovery. In 1980s, this became crisis management. 1990s, we saw business continuity. So, and until 2018, it was the enterprise resilience, but not in the age of digital transformation. What we now see is that this is all getting obsolete, and we are moving towards an age of cyber resilience. And cyber resilience is something which is like something, a capability an organization has to have, and there are some specific characteristic as to what a cyber resilient organization is. It is able to survive and sustain post a cyber attack. If you ask me what is relevance, if you know, there is a risk assessment firm called Moody's, and starting 2021, they are going to factor in the cyber resilient quotient of an organization into the risk assessment. And this rating is now, I mean, it's used by investment firms to rely on the economic indicators of the company, how good an organization is. So it might even impact the shareholder value. There are certain properties of a cyber resilient organization. For example, such organizations are focusing on recovering. I mean, they're very proactive. They detect the cyber threats even before they occur. The cyber defense has a wider coverage in these organizations, and they focus this coverage outside the organization to the public and partner community, and they drive continuous innovation and re-engineering. They are constantly driven by consumer expectations, value generation, and the response is purely based on emerging threats. So my message to my audience here would be to strive and start from little, and at least for next 5 years, you should take immediate steps to be cyber resilient, because that anyways impacts your how good you are as an organization. So with this, I hand over to our CEO, Maxim Chuprunov. Thank you all for giving me an opportunity to present. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vishal, for the very good insights. I would like to wrap up making a link to what my colleague has touched on regarding frameworks and solutions. When Big SOX wave hit the markets over 20 years ago, I was just about to start my career as IT auditor. The approach to design and implement SOX compliance frameworks was established and standardized relatively fast. Now with data privacy requirements, situation is quite different from what we observe. Our impression is that customers need help on a very basic level, getting questions answered like what is needed and for what reasons. It might be due to complexity of the topic because technical, business and legal aspects are intertwined, or probably also due to the lack of management attention with companies we encountered. Privacy controls framework is needed from day one. It can evolve over time, become more mature, but it needs to be complete from legal and technical perspective. And this is what we focus on at Riscomp within our data protection and privacy practice. We advise on the privacy compliance programs, bringing in technical, legal, and compliance expertise. We offer both SAP-specific, but also application-agnostic definitions for processes, risks, objectives, controls, and so on, shaped jointly with customers. Once the framework is shaped and there is a clarity on what is needed and why, there are several solutions which might be helpful. Data privacy can be abstracted in 4 layers: data management, data security, governance and compliance, and consent management. So on the integration side, our main focus with Riscomp is the governance and compliance layer, along with the data security. Here, if you go in details, we have SAP GRC suite with process control, risk management, policy management, access control being part of it. Also, I would like to highlight the new cloud-based solution, SAP Privacy Governance. Those solutions do also relevant for data security in a data security domain. SAP UI masking and logging is one of our core expertise as well. Other solutions inside data management bucket, the known and well-established ILM, SAP Information Lifecycle Management. Within data security, again, SAP data mapping and protection by big IT can be mentioned. And one solution probably not here on the list, but also relevant, this is SAP Data Custodian. Having said that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Next slide, Vishal. And Vincent, if there are any questions from the audience, or if you could guide us or audience through the poll questions, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxim. Thank you, Vishal. So before going into the question, a quick reminder, there is in the platform a poll option. You can find some predefined questions, and there is multiple ones. So there is a next button in orange. Like this, you can move from one question to another and provide your feedback. So let's see what are the questions from the audience. So we already have multiple ones. So first question was related to, yes, who in an organization should be responsible to define which data are personal data? Difficult question.
Oh, yeah. So there are multiple answers to this question. There is no single person who would define. So if you say there could be multiple owners of personal data. So this purely depends on the processing. So if you are collecting employee personal data for the purpose of honoring an employment contract with your employees, then it is the business owner or the data owner, and this would be the HR business partner of your, the HR data owner of your company. So this is tied to the processing. So, but however, if you are collecting personal data from customers, that means you have a retail platform, which is like an e-commerce website, and you collect data of customers. So it is the owner of that process owner who is managing that platform. He is the one who is responsible for, he is owner to that personal data of the customer. So the purpose of the data is determining the ownership. So there could be multiple purposes. So this is a golden rule. Yeah. So because this is, it's not just about data, it's a very wide term. You could have the same data being used for different purposes. So if you have different purposes, the ownership also differs. Yeah.
Thank you, Vishal. And I think it will be also related to the second question. who should be responsible for the definition and maintenance of the register of processing activities?
Okay, so from a legal perspective, the records of processing or privacy registers in legal terms, what we call, making sure that the privacy register is maintained is the task of the privacy legal or your internal company data protection officer or chief privacy officer. His team is responsible to make sure that every processing is present in the privacy register, and the system owners, maybe they're using the same data for different purposes, they comply to this requirement and have an entry. But to maintain or to collaborate to fill a privacy register, it is the data controller or the person who is aware of the purpose of processing. He is the one who has to maintain the privacy register. So yes, the compliance pieces are held by the chief privacy officer, whereas the operational pieces, the contribution or the collaboration pieces are overall maintained by your data controller, and he might have to collaborate with some other teams as well to gather data for himself. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question more related to SAP system. What is the preferable, most often used way of removing the identifiers hiding personal data in SAP environment?
All right. So this again depends on the risk and the cost benefit analysis. So let's say there are clear use cases for that. Okay, there is no firm answer as to, okay, please use masking because masking achieves, masking hides. The problem is, if you mask any identifier, let's say you mask a direct identifier within a record, this is not going to guarantee the attacks. The privacy risks are still open and they can be exploited. You could combine the same data set which is masked with some other data set and then arrive at the individual record. You can identify who the individual is. So I would say that there is no such firm answer to it. It purely depends on the processing and the risk tolerance level that you are able to I would say, absorb. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe a quick complement to your answer. If you want to really, at the end, be able to delete some personal data related to a specific data object like a vendor, a customer, an employee from a SAP ERP system, there is a built-in functionality in the ERP called Information Lifecycle Management, with the capacity to identify the different technical objects related to master data, to transactional data, to document who will hold personal data, and then the capacity to define retention period and trigger deletion job. So here it's deletion. Huh? Once it's done, the data is completely deleted. But it's also one tool, one measure that can be implemented to be able to trigger this deletion, because it's one of the main GDPR data owner rights, the right to be forgotten. And in the SAP world, it's something that is available in all the SAP ERP. And maybe a last question, because we are already over time. Is there a need to hide personal data also in test development systems?
The answer is yes.
Yes. Quick answer is yes. As Vishal explained, the regulation apply everywhere. So potentially even in your archive CDs hold in a vault somewhere, the right to be forgotten should be applied everywhere.
Yeah. Vincent, one more remark. Since you were touching or making a link towards technology or tools, one of the questions was on record of processing activities. On the tool side, this is SPG, SAP Privacy Governance, which can help you to implement related processes.
Very good remark, Maxim. And please also note that we have tomorrow a session held by SAP who will demonstrate how internally we use privacy governance, the solution that privacy governance by SAP. We also use it internally to manage the processing, the registry of processing activities. So thank you. It was very insightful. Before closing the session, just a reminder, you can provide your feedback on this specific